Okay.
I would like to introduce Dr. Tammy Malich, experienced assistant superintendent with a passion for serving youth with the greatest needs, skilled in management, teaching, leadership, project management, customer service, and team building. Strong operations professional with a Doctor of Education, EDD focused in educational leadership and administration, general from Nova Southeastern University.
Thank you. So it is wonderful to be here with you today. I currently serve as the Director of Youth Development and Social Innovation for the City of Las Vegas. I've been with the city for 1 year, transitioning from the Clark County School District for 30 years, where I was a teacher, then a dean, an assistant principal, a principal. I opened 2 brand new schools, a middle school and a high school, and then became an assistant superintendent over alternative ed, adult education, corrections, juvenile and adult corrections, provided educational programming in those facilities. And after my 30 years, a wonderful opportunity opened at the city for me to transition over to still support youth programming from birth to adulthood. So pre-K through grade 16, we consider, and to also do some work in underserved communities through some workforce development, community revitalization. And so it has been a real honor to be able to serve the district in that capacity. My connection to some of you, besides my school district principal role, I also have 2 grown children, and my son, who got to go to university in Chicago on a baseball scholarship, but he graduated with his degree in computer programming, and he now does computer programming for work and for fun. He does a video game blog, and I guess you never get too old for video games. I'm old, I don't understand it, but apparently it is a very real thing for youth and adults. So super excited. I also am excited because I can give you guys my regular spiel and you guys will understand it. Most of the time when I explain this, people have no idea what I'm talking about. But all of you young technology experts, you're going to know exactly what I'm saying. So I'm here today to share with you a program called ACCED, ACCED. It stands for Advanced Connectivity for Community and Economic Development. So ACCED is really a wireless network project that allows you end users in very targeted areas, we'll talk about those in a minute, to use industry standard cellular technology service. We're using 4th generation long-term evolution standards, and we are configuring it with small cell and small antennas mounted on city infrastructure, generally rooftops, street lights, and traffic lights on those poles. We've set up to transition to a 5th generation cellular technology to try and keep up. And we're using a really new concept, the Citizens Broadband Radio Spectrum, so CBRS radio frequency, and those standards. And that is the infrastructure that we are supplying. With that, we then allow end users to basically jump onto our network, which is powered by Cox, and they have free connectivity. Now we are targeting it in a very strategic way. So we're not just handing out modems, allowing users to just get their internet for streaming or to run their Roku or Apple TV or stream movies. We're really doing it for workforce or educational opportunities. The project first started with a workforce focus. We submitted for an EDA grant around connecting the historic West Side, a community that has experienced 3 times the unemployment rate of the greater Las Vegas Valley pre-COVID. And so with this community, largely African American and Hispanic Latino populations, it used to be historically almost predominantly African American, probably, in my opinion, one of the most culturally rich areas of the Southern Nevada community. I was born and raised here, and so I've seen that change over time. Not that long ago in my lifetime, and I don't think I'm too old, Las Vegas was still segregated. And African Americans they could perform on the Strip in downtown, but they couldn't stay there, which is hard for me to imagine. But during the times of segregation, they could only stay in the historic West Side. And with that, a lot of the performers would perform in downtown and then come over to the historic West Side to continue performing after hours and play and eat and stay, because that's the way things were. This is a community that has seen disinvestment over the years. A lot of the original landowners moved out of the community, and part of the city's focus was working with the community to look at how we bring wealth creation, economic development back into the community so that the community is sustainable, so that it's not the city coming and doing for them or to them, but it is the city working hand in hand with the community to bring infrastructure, to bring opportunities into the community, and then handing off to the community to go ahead and continue it and make it sustainable. So when we started this work, we looked at some of the needs, and we listened to the community through charrettes and town halls and community meetings. We talked to community members and asked, what are you lacking? One of the things that we heard loud and clear was infrastructure for broadband and internet, and even for cellular access in some cases. And so listening to that, looking at unemployment rates, they needed a lot of job creation. We had a lot of unemployed and underemployed. And so we really looked at how do we leverage those two things to create jobs and to create local hire benefits and to create opportunity for a community that didn't get the same opportunity as the rest of the valley in many cases. And so our original plan when we first submitted our EDA grant was to bring a private channel through this infrastructure that I shared with you. And through that structure, our end users that we provided our access device, which started as dongles and now is actually modems, it shifted with the change in technology, they would then be able to get onto our network. We could do a couple of things. We could create an app that would have in it resources for job fairs, for referrals, for work-related needs, transportation, uniforms, specialized equipment, credentials. We would work with partners to be able to load those opportunities or resources, information into this app. And then the second thing we would do is leverage we have a TV studio at the city. We would leverage our TV studio, and we would create content and be able to push content out into the community around workforce and around training and development opportunities. So think of it as like Khan Academy or infomercials about how best tips, best practices for going to an interview. How do you carry yourself? How do you dress? What do you bring with you? What are some of the tips and strategies? Where are there job fairs coming up? Right after we submitted the grant and as we got started on this, COVID hit and things shut down, as you know. And from that rose a more immediate need. And the more immediate need was the K-12 digital divide. So the Clark County School District, governor shut down all schools in the state of Nevada, and we had kids go distance learning, and there was no structure in place. We had kids without devices. We had families without high-speed internet. We had a lot of issues around that. So at that point, we had asked the governor's office, the state Office of Science, Math, and Technology, for a letter of support for our initial project around workforce. They reached out and said, why don't you apply for some funds to get this started using the K-12 connectivity? And then you can test your proof of concept, because this was all a proof of concept. we believe it worked. We piloted it, but we hadn't mass used it yet. So with that, we applied for a state grant. We received $1 million from the state in November. And they said, can you get this up and running and spend these dollars and get modems into end users' hands in 2 months? And we said, absolutely. And so we did just that. We set up the infrastructure. We went from the historic west side over into the east side of town near the Huntridge Theater. And we started that process. And what we did, instead of our private TV studio and our app, we got permission from the Clark County School District to tunnel in through a VPN to their live feed to ccsd.net. So we tunneled into their system with their permission and allowing us to create educational connectivity in real time. So any end user, we provided our modem, they log in, set up the modem, connect their device, and it's as if they're sitting in a CCSD school. They get to ccsd.net just like they're in any CCSD building. That did a couple of things. A, it provided free educational connectivity to everyone we gave our modem to. B, it gave a controlled or a safe access line. So many of our students were fighting with family members, other school-age kiddos, parents who were trying to find jobs, older siblings looking for jobs or trying to take college online classes. And so it created a very, very secure network that didn't compete with anything else, because you all know, those of you that are in school and those of you that have just recently graduated, you know that you can't get a lot of places in ccsd.net. It's a very, well, you guys probably can figure out backdoors, but for the regular user, you can't get very far. It's a very secure network. And so we launched the system, the network, and we distributed 100 modems to families with school-age kids at Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority locations, Sherman Gardens Annex, Villa Capri, and Marble Manor Annex. So at those 5 sites, we worked with the Housing Authority. They had prepaid for hotspots for their residents with school-age kiddos for 4 months. School started August 24th. Do the math and go 4 months forward. That meant on December 24th, those hotspots were going dead. So the week between Christmas and New Year's, we deployed 100 modems to those families, collected their hotspot that no longer worked, gave them our modem, gave them step-by-step screenshot instructions for how to set it up. The city set up a technology help desk line, and we handed out those modems, and within an hour, we had 65 users jump onto our network. So we knew now it worked, right? We also asked them to complete a questionnaire for us, and we tracked their IP address and the modem number, serial number. We did that not to collect information about them, but to be able to get information from them, to reach out to them and say what's working, what's not. As we deploy this in a much broader way, what do we need to do better? What are the struggles? What are the challenges? So they can help us perfect it, because 100 users, it's pretty easy to wrap your arms around. Also, when we saw that families weren't logging in and using it, we could reach out and ask, is there a problem? Are you struggling? You know, we found one modem that wasn't working, so we were able to go out and deploy a new one. We had families that needed help with the connectivity. Even though it was a step-by-step, sometimes individuals that aren't tech savvy struggle with that. And so we were able to support them that way. With that, our proof of concept was now being used. It was operational, and we started having other interested parties reach out to us and ask, how do we jump into this and help you ramp this up faster, further? So with that, we have 4 grants. 2 we've already successfully received, 2 more that are in kind of the final phases. I can't release all of the details of all of them because some have very public announcements coming next week. But we've submitted a state grant first state grant. We've now submitted a second state grant. We submitted an EDA grant. Each of those state grants, the first one was $1 million, the second one is $1.5 million. The EDA grant is $2.07 million. And then we submitted a grant to US Ignite through the National Science Foundation for Project Overcome for $350,000. All of those grants focused on a very strategic area of our big plan. Our initial big plan, I told you, was very targeted in areas of focus. The areas of focus were the historic West Side, a neighborhood that needed revitalization and needed access to broadband to make it happen. So that was a workforce focus. The Corridor of Hope. The Corridor of Hope contains a lot of social services and services that support homeless. And the city operates a homeless site in the Corridor of Hope as well. And we are a low barrier homeless facility. We take those that have all kinds of barriers and struggles. We don't turn people away. But how do we help get folks connected to social services, to healthcare, and to workforce? So that's kind of a different focus, right? The medical district. Within the medical district, which is largely downtown, we're looking at connectivity from the standpoint of how do we bring medical care into people's homes. With the pandemic, we saw folks be in their homes for long periods of time with no access and opportunity to get to doctor's offices, and they really didn't want folks coming in unless it was an emergency. So how do we now bring that into people's homes? Working with UNLV and the different various schools of medicine, the focus there is on that. And then our fourth area is the east side of Las Vegas, which again, similar to the historic west side, is an underdeveloped community focusing on workforce. As I mentioned initially, that was our whole scope of work. With the new funding streams from the state, they really asked us to also focus on the K-12 digital divide. So within all four of those areas, we're focusing on K-12, that tunnel into CCSD that I mentioned. Easy to imagine how we would serve the historic west side. I talked to you about our capacity within the Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority already. Similar in the east side, going into community centers and schools in the urban core, providing modems to support kiddos in that fashion. Within the Corridor of Hope, with that opportunity and funding really earmarked for homeless populations, I reached out to the school district, to their Title I homeless office, and said, how do we support K-12 homeless youth? Because they kind of need both, right? They need a workforce, they need the access to healthcare, and oh, by the way, we want them to have that K-12 and get that diploma, that high school diploma in their hands, because a high school diploma removes a lot of barriers, and it's a start to removing those barriers. So they said, of course, we want in. We are all in. So that is really kind of the overview of the project. The long term, the first phase of it was the K-12. That is up and running and operational. We're going to expand that in phase 2, and we're planning on distributing 1,000 more modems to put out into the community. These are school-age kiddos. They only get you to ccsd.net. Other than that, they're not really useful to other types of, for other purposes. Phase 2 of this, which will ramp up within the next 2 weeks, is the Corridor of Hope. We're working with our Office of Government of Community Services and our other service providers in the Corridor of Hope for how do we leverage an application and access to workforce opportunities for our homeless population, and then also run a bifurcated system so that we'll offer for our homeless youth that, as well as that K-12 ccsd.net access. We can control the access because they're going through our network, if you will. And then the third phase of this, provided we get the EDA grant, then we will fully ramp up the workforce and the workforce at full capacity in all of the areas I've already mentioned. So anybody who has a modem at that point, we can open that pathway into that workforce lane for them as well. And then we can communicate with them through the fact that we have collected email addresses. We can push messages out to them to let them know, hey, we're opening a new portal that will give you access to all of the workforce resources, virtual job fairs, etc. That is kind of the big picture of this work. The benefit of it so far has been free educational connectivity to families that otherwise would not have that. CCSD did work with Cox to push out free hotspots, but those sunset on June 30th, 2021. So when school ends, those will sunset. That doesn't mean families won't still need educational connectivity. In the meanwhile, if K-12 goes back to full in-person, and there's not as big of a need for the K-12, we've already started the conversation with our INSHE institutions. That's the Nevada System of Higher Education. So we've reached out to CSN, UNLV, and UNR to talk to them about how could we do the same thing we did with CCSD, tunnel in to your feed with your permission. Our system then and our modem would bring access to your server into people's homes in real time. Then they can go through university, register as a student, pay their fees, whatever that looks like, leverage their loans or grants or whatever that equates to. But then we would be the conduit to bring the access into their homes at a time when families are struggling with transportation barriers and childcare barriers. They can have access to higher ed in their homes, and internet, high-speed internet, is not a barrier because our system remains free for the life of the system as long as we keep it turned on. So that's kind of the future wave of the education part of this that also connects into the workforce work with this. So that is really what we are looking to do, what we are already in the midst of doing, and kind of what it looks like in the future. Questions?
That was awesome. I don't have a question right now. I just have a comment that this is just a phenomenal, and thank you for making it so clear, that whole pipeline and pathway of how you're integrating with the education and workforce system using the connectivity through technology. Is amazing what you all are doing. And the fact you can remember all that in such a seamless way, that you could literally paint the picture for us. I was visually traveling with you down that whole journey. But I'll pause for a moment, see if anyone have questions, and I'll come back at the end. I tried to write lots of notes, but whoever has questions. Amani, is your hand up? Oh, I see somebody joining us, Chris Davis. And while we're waiting on questions, I did want to acknowledge, I saw Amet, because there were some letters down at the end of our team here, and I saw Amet here, our Google specialist. He's one of our students. And Kayla is one of our students. I see her on here as well with Kayla and Laura and Stephanie. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that I see you all online as well. And so if any of you all have questions, and then Kayla is one of our newest students from our Friday class. I see you as well. Any questions that you all have of Dr. Tammy, our students, or anybody, IT roundtable members? And then Chris Davis, I'm not sure who that is, but it must be someone from our invitation. I would assume an IT roundtable guest. So,
I will also give kudos to the students while people are thinking about questions. I also chair the education committee for the NAACP. And so I got to see the valuable system you all set up for the parade as we were completing our few little seconds to push out. So kudos to all of you. I didn't know that's where it came from, but kudos to all of you. I just thought it came from Wendell P. Williams. I didn't know you guys had it. I was giving him all the credit.
He's our senior advisor, so he is a part of our team and one of our mentors for the students, and one of our senior advisors for Nevada Help Desk as well. So we work. I've been participating with the Dr. Martin Luther King Committee since I was these students' age, since I was like 18 or 17. So
I also read your last newsletter, and it was phenomenal. And I shared it with the entire NAACP membership because it was your Black History Edition, but more importantly, as an educator, my favorite part, and yes, I watched the whole 1 hour plus of it. My favorite part was the paying homage to African Americans who have schools named after them. That Bev Mathis kind of facilitate. What? And you know, when you tell people it's over an hour, they think, "Oh, how do you sit?" It was phenomenal.
Wow.
Excellent job. Hats off to everyone that was involved. I worked for the district for a very long time and know many of those people personally. I learned so much in that time. It was the best time I spent. So thank you for that.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. And our students, I see Reggie has a question. I'm going to put it back on unmute. I saw that he was about to ask a question, but thank you. And these are the students. There's some that's not here that was in that digital magazine, but yes, these are the mastermind, the brains behind all of that. Reggie, go right ahead. I saw your line was unmuted.
Yes, yeah. First of all, yeah, I invited Chris Davis to come on because he has some good content on it. But my question for the doctor is, in terms of educational content, I hear it's Clark County schools. Have you guys thought about maybe broadening that to other avenues of educational content?
Yeah, we are certainly, yes. So it started with the state funding a quick fix for the K-12 landscape. We definitely are open to broadening it. As I mentioned, we came up with this higher ed conversation after, you know, what happens when school goes back and kids don't need this, they don't need us anymore. How do we continue that? So we are definitely open and receptive to other educational opportunities. The city's in the education space. So yeah, if you have ideas, we would love to talk more about that.
Yes, because you know, I'm also on the STEM committee for the state as well. And I haven't seen the state really open the aperture up to other national resources yet. And I'm just kind of throwing that out there. I'll give you an example because I'm in the cybersecurity field. I deal with, you know, cybersecurity.org, totally free labs. No one knows about it. And yeah, and it's totally free. And that's just one example of many out there. And that's why I'm just bringing that up, just to make a suggestion to other avenues where you guys can talk and get more content, educational content available out here. I think that'd be helpful.
Great idea. And I'm thinking maybe our partnership with Nevada Help Desk, between the city and Nevada Help Desk, maybe we can also parlay that into other opportunities with technology resources. And, you know, we have a partnership with CSN where we will be, city will be building a 10,000 square foot workforce training center in the historic West Side in Washington and D. And CSN will operate it. It will be a credential facility. So with a pipeline to higher ed, but it won't be a degree bearing, they won't have degree bearing courses there, but they're going to have technology, health sciences, construction trades, and advanced manufacturing. So the more we can create a pipeline to technology, we have our own Strong Future Technology Training lab that Duana was talking about earlier that is has a Cox Innovation Center where they put up funding. Thank you to Councilman Creer, who made that all possible. We have a very robust technology training lab, an esports programming and all of the equipment, recording opportunities, recording equipment for video and audio, trying to bring in some esports, cybersecurity, application design, web design programming into that space for the community. So I think, you know, providing resources and tips and suggestions around technology, I think we all learned during the pandemic how technologically illiterate we are, even those of us that work in it, and how great the need is. I mean, I would imagine we're going to see some businesses and trade continue to stay in this virtual space, even post-COVID. I know that some people who started shopping online may not go back into a brick and mortar shopping experience because they didn't realize you can get all the sizes and colors and shapes and get them in 2 days for free to live. You know, that whole conversation that, you know, people were kind of forced into. I think there's going to be a need, whether it be for recreational or personal or professional, a need to share and leverage technology tips and resources.
Yeah, and that'd be great. I'll work directly with Dewana. You know, I've been talking to her and Larry about this new industry coming about in the defense space, which is quickly spilling over both nationally and internationally, where we're going to be having an opportunity to certify people to become compliance-based cybersecurity professionals, making sure that people meet compliance standards. And rumor is, once this one for the Department of Defense takes hold, I think the rest of the nation is going to follow suit. And it'd be nice if we can develop a pipeline early. And I'm thinking at the earliest 6 months, the way it's going, the guys from the East Coast telling me this is about 6 months, the pipe is really going to open up, and I'm really going to have a big need for people. So don't want to promise anything, but that's what I'm hearing right now.
Okay.
Sounds good. And I know where to find Reggie, so we're stuck at the hip. And not a problem. I love it because, like I say, I call him Mr. Cybersecurity. I did see, I just wanted to mention, since the students are here and they weren't with me on the tour earlier, as I heard you sharing what all is over there at the Strong Future Tech Lab, that I saw 3D printing there as well. I just wanted to add that as you were listing the name of things that were there. And then also, because Darren met me over there also with Sheena, and I talked to him about virtual reality. He said, yeah, you guys are doing that as well, are going to be doing it. And then also drone technology, because we have, of course, partnerships with that as well, drone technology. So I just want to mention it while we have the students on the line, and I have that flyer for this weekend for the esports. So I'll make sure all of the students online get that as well. And I love that the students are here because they're getting this experience of this, like, you know, leadership meeting and having a director level from the city of Las Vegas. All students aren't exposed to this kind of, you know, and all the tech leaders' quality of just this experience alone. They'll never forget it because these, of course, is our future, our next generation of leaders. So I'm loving this. I'm loving
the educator in me would much rather hang out with high school kids than grown folks who know better and should know better. So that's where my heart is. And to your point, also something I didn't mention because it's not directly related to the ASED programming, but we believe in the STEAM learning opportunities. We use those in the schools we support for CCSD. We believe in it so much that I don't know if the preschool bus was there when you were there, but we have 2 mobile pre-K programs. One parks at the Historic West Side half day, one at Doolittle half day, one across from Lead Animal Shelter, and one at Red Rock Elementary. We also use STEAM activities, drones, Autobots, coding, early coding with our preschool babies. So we do that with our 3- and 4-year-olds because we want to start the conversation early. Yes. And you know, they don't even realize they're learning coding at that age, and they love it. It's great for your brain as well. And then in Darren's office, I don't know if you went to his office.
I did.
We are in the process of ordering small business support, creating a small business support center over there to order equipment like high-speed laser printer, another 3D printer, some things that the small business startups may not want to invest their capital in as they're getting started. How do we help support them? Not every business needs a 3D printer, but they might have an occasion where they need access to one or a high-speed laser printer, especially as they're getting started. And so we're looking at creating a market hall and small business incubator on site. We're in conversations right now, which will also be on that Washington and D Street. And so we're trying to create this small business support center so we can help support businesses, help them navigate code enforcement, licensing, all those complicated processes, and then also have equipment and access to our tech training lab, a conference room, the things that we have on site at the historic West Side School campus to help support them. We also have a workforce one-stop career center on site. So again, leveraging all of those resources to help serve our community.
I love it. I know our students have questions after all that. I know because they host radio show and stream television videos. So I know they have a question after all of that. That's amazing. Just awesome. I'm a proud Las Vegas resident. I love it.
Me too.
Anybody else? Any questions from our students?
I had a question. This was just a lot of information for me, and I just kind of wanted to better understand what your project was doing. So just to kind of like summarize, what your project does is that you bring modems into people's homes to give them access to CCSD internet?
Well, yes, but first we created that infrastructure through that. We leveraged the CBRS by putting the antennas and the transmitters on the light poles and on the building. So first we created the structure, and then the modem is their access to our structure. We get a mile radius of really high speed, really strong internet connectivity. And so the structure comes first, then we give them the modem. If we give them the modem without that, then they have a modem, but they can't really connect to anything. So this allows our infrastructure, allows them to use the modem, then connect on the back of the city, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question as well.
Sure.
What motivated you to get into being an educator? Since I know, like, as of the recent years, there's been a lack of educators and teachers in schools as well. So what made you want to go into the field of education?
So thank you for that question. I wanted to be a teacher as long as I could remember. I was that kid playing school with my siblings growing up. And then when I got my last year in high school, I had a teacher, not one of my teachers, but it was actually a boyfriend in high school's mom who was a teacher, who said to me, "Oh, that's a terrible decision. Don't be a teacher. It's an awful job." And I thought, oh, maybe, what if she's right? So I actually went to college and got my bachelor's degree in business administration with an emphasis in economics and finance. And then I got my teaching credential on top of it. That afforded me, and those of you in college, think about this, that gave me a backup plan, right? Because what if I get into teaching, my base degree as a teacher, elementary education or secondary education, there's not a lot you can do with that. Who else needs a teacher besides school districts? Some entities hire teachers as trainers and whatnot, but really, it's not a real useful degree outside of the education space. And I thought, what if I get there and she's right and I don't like kids or I don't like teaching? So the business administration gave me a really solid base for a lot of different job opportunities. Got the education credits on top of, went into the district and started teaching, and I loved it. So I stayed 30 years. But now in my city world, and I think even in my education world, the business degree gives me that business sense in how I managed education, which sometimes the business community is critical of the school district for not doing anything with a business head or in a business sense. But I joked with you guys earlier, and I was really serious. I feel like working with kids, I've worked at elementary, middle, and high. My favorite is high school because you get to see what kids become. And I was that principal that was very hands-on. I knew all my kids. I knew what was going on. I incorporated them in the graduation speech. I was that person. I loved watching the academic journey at the end with young people. I loved helping them to grow and see their futures. And I took that role very seriously. And being a part of that was, I felt like a real honor and privilege. And with parents as well, I felt my students knew. I opened Findlay Middle School, and then I opened Legacy High School a year and a half later. And those kids and their parents knew when their mamas and daddies were at work, I was their mom, and I would treat them the same I did my own kiddos. I would fight for them, but that means I get to fight with you. If I'm going to fight for you and you set me up, you let me go into that teacher like a mama bear, and you just drop the ball, then I'm going to fight with you. And so I really loved, I had a passion for it. I thought I did, but I had a backup plan. So those of you in college and your final years of high school, think about a backup plan. A whole bunch of people enter the workforce, or professional athletes, they enter that world and they get injured and they have no backup plan. Or you go into a business and the business closes, and you don't have another job skill, or you don't like it. It's just not a good fit for you. So have a backup plan. Think about diversifying yourself in your portfolio, your professional and academic portfolio, so that when you go out, it makes you more marketable, and it gives you opportunities and options.
Of course, as you said, people's opinions do sometimes persuade what, future choices you make. What was your biggest motivation, even though you didn't know what the end result was going to be? Is there like another time that you could mention where, you said, oh, I want this for these kids, even though, they're not your biological kids, but, you're still your kids?
So my motivation going into it was, I came from a family where nobody had anything beyond a high school diploma, and I also come from a family from the South, where oftentimes in that generation they married very early and started having babies, especially women. You get married and have babies. That's what women do. That was kind of the thinking in that time frame. No disrespect. That was the landscape. And so I was motivated by the fact that I also was adopted. So I didn't come from this privilege. I mean, I did come from a privileged upbringing, but not initially. My father, who adopted me, did very well in life. He was a very successful businessman. So I came from privilege later in life from that standpoint. But he started by sweeping the floors in the company, literally, and wound up owning the company. So it was one of those stories that you watch a Disney movie on and think, oh, that's so ridiculous. True story. He had a work ethic like no other, and he expected and demanded that of us. And so I was driven by that work ethic. Once I got into schools, though, to the latter part of your question, I connect with young people. I'm a people person anyways, but I really connected with young people, and I had a way of through an empathy lens, putting myself in their shoes, and that created this connection right away. And as I mentioned earlier, I take very seriously being responsible for other people's children. That's their most valuable resource, their babies. And even when you're 16, 17, 20, you're still somebody's baby. I took that very seriously. And so I did that work with the respect and honor of somebody entrusted me with their most precious resource, their baby. When I became an assistant superintendent, I mentioned I worked with behavior schools and continuation schools. I worked with incarcerated youth and incarcerated adults. That made me value that even more, because again, these kiddos and young men up at High Desert State Prison in the Youthful Offenders Program, they thought they were grown and hard, and they were somebody's baby. And when I looked them in the eyes and talked to them, they had feelings just like somebody else, somebody's baby. They were regular kids who made a bad choice, who got caught up in something. And so that made me value even more the power of mentorship and somebody taking a minute to listen to your story and advocate for you and fight for you, whether they know you or have a responsibility to do it. And that has really driven me. I mentioned I chair the education committee for the NAACP. I also chair the educational task force for the Las Vegas My Brother's Keeper. I do those things in my spare time for that same reason. I have a passion to make a difference, especially for underserved. I feel like that is my personal commitment, and the little thing I can do to help leave this world a better place than it was created before I entered it. I'm going to do my best to make sure before I leave it, I do everything that I can do within my power to make the world a better place, especially for people who haven't been given the same opportunities.
That is so wonderful. I think you need the National Award of the Year, Nobel Peace Prize or something.
No.
It's so amazing. And we were on that My Brother's Keepers conference last month. Phenomenal, with all the virtual national speakers. It was just amazing. So any of our students, any more questions of anybody before we wrap it up today? Are there any other questions from our IT roundtable members or our chair or students or even the guests, Chris? Anyone?
I do want to say one thing. I really appreciate this conversation. I can feel your passion, and it's coming from the heart. So I really, nothing else. You know, the information was great, but the warmth that you show for this is much stronger for me, because I come from that age group where that was important. So I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for those floating hearts too, Archie.
Any closing comments, Dr. Tammy and our chair?
I just thank you for the opportunity to share, and for the students. It will be every day, because we will be much more close and comfortable now with this partnership. And truly, Dwana, I have no concerns if you want to share my contact information with anyone in this group. My cell phone, my email address. I am happy to help, answer questions, give tours, do whatever we can to help spread information, help make a difference. So really, if I can be a resource to you or help any of you, because if you can be a resource to me, I will definitely reach out and leverage that. So
that is so awesome. Thank you, Dr. Tammy. We're so gracious to have you today. I'm glad that our president, Ken Evans, made this connection in term after we had already partnered together. I'm like, but I love it, and love the new marriage, and it's just an exciting journey, and I can't wait for the days to come, because as you said, this partnership is so exciting, probably one of the most, and right up the street also from where we're headquartered at Zappos. So it's like, I was like, I can see, I think our headquarters right from here. So it's great. Everything is really coming together so beautifully. And any final comments from anybody that's on our team before we wrap it up? Any of our team, and then our chair before we close out our day?
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate hearing about your project.
thank you.
I found your project really inspiring.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we're turning it back over to you.
Again, this is one of the more fascinating roundtables we've had in a while. I'm glad we're back on board. I'm glad the first one for this year was so exciting and heartfelt. So looking forward to working with you, looking forward to talking to you some more. And I will turn it back over to the co-chair. So she always ends it very cordially.
Well, know that you are loved and appreciated, and we just thank you for your time and for everyone's attention. Until we meet again.